Support for the Nocturnists comes from the California Medical Association.
At the Nocturnists, we are careful to ensure that all stories comply with healthcare privacy laws. Details may have been changed to ensure patient confidentiality. All views expressed are those of the person speaking and not their employer.
You're listening to The Nocturnists, stories from the world of medicine. I'm Emily Silverman. Today, we feature another story from the live show that we produced in New York City in November 2023. The theme of the show was Taking Care, and we produced it in partnership with Danielle Ofri and Ashley McMullen of the Bellevue Literary Review. This storyteller is a medical student. Her name is Shaida Kamali, and she came over to Oklahoma from Rwanda when she was in college to pursue her education. While Shaida was in school, she learned some tragic and unexpected news, which is that her mother had passed away. And Shaida ended up subsequently bringing over her 10-year-old brother from Rwanda and raising him in Oklahoma in the midst of pursuing her studies. It's an incredible story about family, resilience, education, and of course, one of the most important aspects of home, food. After Shaida's story, she and I sat down and talked more extensively about her journey from Rwanda to the US. We talk about how she spent a bunch of time hanging out with local moms in Oklahoma, which was awkward at first, but eventually amounted to a village of sorts who helped her raise her brother. We talk about how Shaida loves the TV show Modern Family and her work in the clinical lab, which eventually evolved to medical school, and now Shaida thinks a career in geriatrics. But most special is that Shaida and I have a chance to listen to an audio clip together that Shaida references in her story. It's a clip from when Shaida's mom was still alive, where Shaida's mom joyfully explains the recipe for Shaida's brother's favorite food, peanut curry. But first, let's take a listen to Shaida's story, recorded live in New York in 2023. It's called A Taste of Home.
I'm in my new apartment on campus, and there's boxes all around me. I had to move in the middle of the school year, and in front of me is my brother's suitcase. He just arrived in Oklahoma from Kigali, Rwanda. As I open it to figure out what he brought with him, I can hear his footsteps running around. I moved because I needed a bigger apartment with one more room for him. He's gonna have a room of his own. And I adopted my brother because we recently lost our mother. When I open the suitcase, the first thing I see is these red, shiny boots. I didn't know this guy likes red like that. So I set them aside and I look for shirts, shorts, socks. I find a couple of shirts, no socks. What's really taking place in his suitcase is this big bag of peanut flour, like ground peanut flour. I take the bag, I shove it into the pantry. What am I supposed to do with that? He comes in running and he says, Shaida, we're on the 3rd floor. I can take an elevator to my room. He's very excited. When we lost our mom, he didn't have anybody else, so I adopted him. He lost a home, so for the past few months, he didn't have a home as I was trying to figure out his visa and paperwork. And now he feels like he finally has a home. He's excited. I'm not excited, though. I'm really nervous. I don't know how to raise a kid. He's 10 years old. I am 22. I am a senior about to graduate college. I don't know how middle school works in the US, especially in Oklahoma. I feel like when I lost my mom, I lost the foundation of my life, and she encouraged me to study and get higher education. I got a scholarship and came to the United States. But she's gonna miss all that. She wanted me to go to medical school and be a doctor. I don't even know I can do that now. I lost the foundation of my life. I feel like I'm in the air. And now I have this child that we have to land together. I take a deep breath. I get ready for his first day of school. A friend of mine takes him because I have to go to school before him. I was doing clinicals in that year. When I see him at the end of his first day, I ask him, "Hey, Sean, how was your first day?" "Good." "Did you make friends?" "Yes." "Did you meet your teachers?" "Yes." I mean, he doesn't tell me any details. He still doesn't. I ask him about anything. Well, he talks about his school lunch. He says, "I don't like school lunch." "Okay," I say, "we're going to start packing for you." So he starts packing his own school lunches. I mean, this kid is so good. He wakes himself up early. We have a schedule of who's picking him up because I'm gone already. He never misses his alarm. He's ready at 11. He's getting himself to school and coming back. I graduate college. I take a full-time job. I work the night shift at the hospital. And we make it. Days go. I have such a supportive community. But I realize my friends move out of town. They take on new jobs. I feel stuck. This is not what I wanted to do with my life. The people I hang out with are mothers, and I am very awkward with them. I don't really know what to discuss. I don't understand football so well, and it's such a big deal in Oklahoma. And as I watch my brother grow into this brilliant young man who is in love with sports, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And when he starts driving, I teach him how to drive, and we decide we're going to be practicing every morning when I'm getting off work so he can drive himself to school and get more practice time. So one morning I get off work, I call him, I say, "Hey, get ready, I'm on my way." It's 7:30 a.m., a 12-hour shift. I just want to go to bed. When I pull up to our apartment and as I watch him come out with everything in his hands instead of his backpack, I'm thinking we're already going to be late. I move over to the passenger seat and I turn on the radio, and the sun is just shining so bright in my face. Why am I taking somebody to school? He gets into the driver's seat and he's driving. He's such a good driver. And we turn on the radio and we're listening to the radio. That's sort of our habit because I realized if I say something, I may end up dumping all my frustration from my night shift to this poor guy who's just starting his day. So when we pull up to the last stop sign, as we're about to park the car, he sees his friends and he makes this sharp turn and hits the curb. He hits the curb so hard, I feel myself losing the air. And I'm turning red and I'm so mad, and I look at him and he says, "Oops." What? So he parks the car and I look at the time, it's 7:58. I can kick this guy out of my life right now. I say, "Get out. Go to school." He doesn't realize anything happened. He just gets his bag and walks to class with his friends. And as I move into the driver's seat, I feel so alone. The childhood my brother is having is so different from mine. I'm not sure I'm raising him right because I grew up in a house that was always an open door. We had people coming in to eat. We had laughter. We had conversations. We had a lot of people who came to eat my mom's food because she was such a good cook and she loved sharing food. We had homeless kids come in. We had anybody in the neighborhood could come in and eat anytime. I don't feel like I'm giving that to my brother. The highlights of my childhood don't look like his. I don't really know what I'm doing. And at that moment, I want to ask my mom, how do I go on? What am I doing? And as I'm driving and I get to that first light on my way back to my apartment, I want to ask my mom, how did she raise us with so much love and comfort when she was grieving herself? My mom lost all her family to the genocide against Tutsis in Rwanda, but that wasn't part of my childhood. My childhood was food, people, laughter, and kindness. When I get to my apartment, I go to bed because I really need to sleep. And when I wake up, I go to the kitchen in the afternoon like I normally do, trying to figure out what to make for dinner. And when I open the pantry, I see that big bag of peanut flour is still there, many, many years later. And I remember when I was in college, my mom sent me an audio on how to make peanut curry. I've never listened to that audio ever since she passed away because hearing her voice, I feel scared. I don't know what I'll hear because we lost her so suddenly. I'm not sure what that voice will tell me. But I really, really would like to hear her right now. So I find it in my phone and I click play. And the first sound I hear is my sister Shamira saying, "Okay, you can talk now." She goes, "Well, who am I talking to?" She says, "Ma, just talk." And my mom launches into this chef mode. She goes, "You chop the onions, you wash the carrots." And she's being humorous, and she's like, she's on a TV show. And in 50 seconds, she's already told me how to make peanut curry. And she says, "Murakoze," like she's on a show and the lights are out. I play the audio again, over and over. This is what I missed. So I go to the fridge, I get the onion, I get the carrots, I get the peas, and I take the pan. And as I watch the onions sizzle, like she says, I add the cumin and the garlic, but she's not telling me any of the amounts. She says, "I will know when it's ready and I will know what to put in." And I make paste with the peanut flour, and as I watch it turn red and creamy, I know it's ready. By the time my brother comes home from school, I've listened to that audio way too many times. And when he comes in, he takes a shower, and I make a bowl of rice, and I put the curry on top, and we sit on the floor like we normally sit, and I'm waiting for him to take his first bite. I say, "What do you think?" He goes, "Shaida, this is my favorite food. That's why I brought a whole bag of peanut flour from home." I had never realized that. But as I watch how he's enjoying the food and as I eat it and it tastes like my mom's curry, the love, the comfort, the courage that I've wanted so much is right there in my brother's eyes.
I am sitting here with Shaida Dusenge Kamali. Shaida, thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
So Shaida, I loved your story about juggling being a student and being a parent in Oklahoma, and was wondering if you could tell us a bit about how you landed in Oklahoma.
So I first learned about Oklahoma from my acceptance letter to the Oklahoma Christian University. When I finished high school, I am from Kigali in Rwanda. I was one of the top scorers in the country. We do something called the national exam, and that puts you on a list of people who can receive a scholarship called the Presidential Scholarship. So I got on that list, and after that we do English exams, similar to what the ACT is here. And when you take that exam, your scores will match you to universities that are affiliated with the Rwandan presidential program. And Oklahoma Christian University was one of them. So the university actually picks you as the student, and you don't really have a say on where you go. So I remember I had just finished my English exam like 2 days before, and I'm waiting for an email. And I open it, and my mom is sitting next to me, and we read Oklahoma. And she's like, "Are you sure that is in the United States? Because we really knew New York and California only." And so we Google it, and I remember Googling Oklahoma Christian University. They have a picture of a clock tower. And then my mom was like, "Okay, we're just so happy. This is a full scholarship." I got it in March 2013 is when I received the acceptance email. It's a prestigious scholarship too. It was such a moment of relief for my mom. My mom survived the Rwandan genocide. Before the genocide in Rwanda, some people were called Tutsis, others were called Hutu. People who were labeled or called Tutsi were thrown out of class. So my mom never actually went through her high school. She never got to finish it. So she had this thing of thinking, if I was denied my education, my kid is going to get education. So I was raised to always believe I'm going to be top of my class. I'm going to get everything I can get out of education. So I think seeing that email was absolutely the highlight of the year. Unfortunately, that meant I was going to be moving really far from her. But we started preparing for my trip. I landed in Oklahoma on August 12th, 2013. It was really, really hot. The first time I had ever felt this kind of heat. And everything looked brown and it looked very different from the United States I had seen on TV. I can tell you that. A lot of land. And I was thinking, okay, well, this is strange. I was part of a group of 7 students, so we didn't travel alone. But yeah, that's how I landed in Oklahoma. And I'm still there 11 years later.
Did you know when you came to the United States that you were interested in becoming a doctor?
I think I've always wanted to be a doctor. Even in my interview with Oklahoma Christian University, because they send people from the universities to interview us in Rwanda, they asked me what I wanted to be. And I said I wanted to be a doctor. And I remember them asking, well, do you know as an international student, it can be difficult to get into medical school? And I said, yes, but I think I want to work in the hospital and I'll find a way to work in the hospital. So that was my answer during the interview then, because I wasn't sure if I want to be in the hospital as a physician or a nurse or something else, but I knew I wanted to be part of the hospital system of caring for patients and making people feel better.
And I know you've been working as a medical laboratory scientist before medical school, so tell me about that work.
When I first started undergrad, I was a biochemistry major. In my junior year, I did a summer research program at the Stephenson Cancer Center, which is here in Oklahoma City. And bench work, wet lab research, it did not inspire me. At the end of that summer, I actually did really well in the program, presented my research. It was on ovarian cancer and multi-drug resistance. But going back to school, the very first day of my fall semester in my junior year, I told my academic advisor I did not want to do research. I said I want a career that puts me closer to the patient and something I can do if I stop at my bachelor degree level. So we looked at my option. My academic advisor suggested nursing. I was thinking, I'm not sure if I want to do nursing. And then he said, well, there's a new program here at Oklahoma Christian University of medical laboratory science. Would you like to do that? I was like, yes. What that really meant was I was switching my major really late. So in my junior year, and part of the contract of my scholarship was I have to graduate in 4 years. So that semester I had to take 21 credits because the medical laboratory science program, your 4th year is also clinicals, like a nursing program. And then you sit and you get certified to do patient tests. But it worked. And when I graduated, I really loved working in the lab. I still do, actually. So it ended up being the right choice.
And for people listening who don't know the difference between a basic science lab and a medical lab, maybe you can talk about the difference and what the day-to-day is in the medical lab.
A basic science lab or a research lab is you get to ask questions about patient care and you can pursue those questions. You can pursue which drugs are better for patient outcomes. You can pursue certain biomarkers and stuff like that. It's a very molecular biology field. At least that's the research lab I was in that summer. But when it comes to a clinical lab, which is where I've worked, you are taking a test tube of blood drawn from a patient and you're doing tests to answer a question that a physician is looking for to figure out what is this patient suffering from or what is the diagnosis. And you have to look at results and know what is normal for this patient or what is okay for me to release to the physician for them to make a decision. And that requires you to be certified. So I had to sit for a certification exam and become board certified.
And so this is tests like CBC, CMP, INR, things like that?
Correct. So most people probably take blood thinners. It's tests to see how is the medication working. You know, your PT, your PTT. I did urinary analysis looking for bugs. I did microbiology. Then I focused more on blood bank, which is transfusion medicine. So I now focus on matching blood products, so like plasma and platelets, any kind of blood product a patient needs, so that we make sure it's compatible, because you always want to make sure you give them something that won't have any adverse reaction, or at least minimizes it as much as possible.
And now you are a second-year medical student. So what are you thinking about your medical career?
Well, so I would have given you a very different answer if you asked me this question last year when we met in New York. I wasn't very sure. I thought I was going to go into internal medicine. But now I can tell you, I think I'm going to go into geriatrics. I just spent my summer at Harvard Medical School and Brigham and Women's Hospital in a national funded research program on aging research. I've become very interested in caring for older adults. Part of that is also because I really enjoy conversations with older adults. I think a lot of medical students do a lot of shadowing to find where do I feel comfortable or where can I see working for the rest of my life. And I just really enjoy working with older patients. So in the questions I ask myself when it comes to research in aging are questions that I can wake up and continuously pursue them. They don't bore me or exhaust me, at least as of right now.
Some of my favorite doctors are geriatricians, so I'm not surprised to hear that you're drawn toward that field. So remind me, where on your journey were you when your brother arrived in the US? I know you were 22, he was 10. And how did you navigate that sudden transition from being his sister to being his parental figure?
This is going to be the long version of the story compared to what I performed. August 2016, I was in my senior year of college. So I'm starting clinical rotations. I believe I had just started hematology, and I was doing it at the University of Oklahoma Health Science Center. And at 4 a.m., I get a phone call from my sister, and my sister calls me, and it's like a Monday morning, and she's like, Shaida, I need you to call the hospital. And I'm like, which hospital? And my sister is calling me from Kigali. She's like, the hospital keeps saying that mom just passed away. And this was a shock to me because I actually did not know my mom was in the hospital. I did not know she had been taken to the ER the night before. That information had been kept away from me. So I hang up and I call my dad. My dad is Indian. He lives in Rwanda. He's lived in Rwanda for over 30 years now. My mom raised us as a single mom, so they didn't live together at the time. So I call him and I say, Shamir is asking me about mom. Do you know what's going on? And he says, Shaida, I am at the hospital. I'm afraid your mom just passed away. So I hang up. I wake up my roommate, a really good friend of mine. And I'm like, I think my mom just passed away. And so she hugs me. And then I'm just like, okay, so what am I supposed to do next? And I open up my school email and I emailed Kelsey, who was the international student advisor at that time. He worked in the international student organization at Oklahoma Christian. And I tell him, Kelsey, I think I'm going to need to go home because I just found out my mom passed away. I think he responded back by 6 a.m. He was someone who really knew well the program and worked with the government of Rwanda. I think by 12 p.m. that day, I already had my flight ticket from Rwanda booked for me, and I would be traveling on Tuesday morning. Now, unfortunately, our trip is really long to get home, but I'm really thankful to the Rwandan government because they tried to book the shortest trip they could, but it still meant I go from Oklahoma to another big hub. I went to Chicago, then Chicago to Amsterdam, Amsterdam to Kigali. The whole time as I'm getting on that flight, part of me just thinks something is just off. And I really still don't know the cause of death either. I don't understand what happened. But I have all these messages that keep dinging on my phone about being sorry, condolence messages, and all this. Anyway, so I fly to Kigali. I was a wreck on the whole flight, just crying, and people next to me just really were like, oh my God. They were in for like a good 8 hours of awkwardness. And I remember when I landed at Kanombe, which is the main airport in Kigali, part of me was hoping my mom is going to be out there. She used to wear these really nice floral dresses, and she would always be standing in front of everyone at the airport waiting for me. And then I don't see her, and part of me is like, oh, okay, maybe this is true. But as I'm looking for my mom's face, I see my little brother. He had just turned 11 that July. And I think that's when it hit me in my head, because normally my brother used to be holding hands with my mom. And I'm like, okay, here's my brother, and he's standing alone. And then right behind him, my dad had also come to the airport. So I woke up, I hugged them. Kigali is such a small city that even the people at the airport probably already knew I was there because my mom passed away. So like a lot of random people hugged me, telling me they're sorry. And all that seems like a blur, but I remember the image of my brother waiting for me without my mom holding his hands. It was the first time I questioned, okay, where's my brother gonna go? And I didn't really have an answer to that. And I didn't know just yet how that was going to be a very important question for me to answer until the day of the funeral. So on the day of the funeral, in the morning, we're getting ready. Family always wears the traditional wear, which is called imishanana in Rwanda. It very much looks like a sari for the Indian culture. And I remember sitting in the room, putting on makeup, and my roommate from college, so the same girl who hugged me first after I found out this news, her mom walks into the room and she says, Shaida, I'd like to talk to you. And this was my very first time meeting my roommate's mom. I'm like, okay, yeah, please come in. And she sits with me and she goes, I'm really sorry. I know you have to grieve for your mom right now, but have you thought about your brother? It was that big elephant in the room the whole time we were planning for the funeral. It felt almost ridiculous that I would have to account for flowers, for the casket, and all that. But all my relatives, nobody was talking about how my little brother didn't have anywhere else to go. My mom doesn't have a big extended family. My dad had not stepped up or even proposed the idea of taking him. It seemed to be implied that he would be going to boarding school, yet he was in fourth grade. So there was really no answer to that. But this woman who I was meeting for the very first time in my life comes in and says, you should take him. So I can't even claim credit for the decision of for the decision of raising my brother, because her name is Mama Fifi, and she just said, Shaida, you're going to take him, and we're going to figure out a way for you to do that. But I want you today to enjoy your mom's last event and not worry about this problem. And it was such a huge gift that day, because I remember just sitting back and thinking, I will figure that out. There's a way. Because I had not thought of bringing him to the United States. I had just thought, I am going to probably request to graduate early or see if I can request for my scholarship to extend and give me like a 1 year off to figure out my brother's situation, and then I'll come back and finish later or something like that. But the minute she said, oh, I know how you're going to take him, you just wait, we're going to figure it out. But for today, just enjoy your mom's last event. And I had 9 days off. So after the funeral, we packed up all of my mother's house and gave away everything to charity. My sister was about to start college, so she was moving in another town in northern Rwanda for college. And in the meantime, when I returned to the United States, as I was writing letters to every single administrative office, my brother would stay with my cousin, Rosine. He would spend some time in Mama Fifi's house, sort of hoping from one place to another without an address until his visa got approved. And he flew in January 17, 2017.
And we heard a lot in the story about how you navigated this sudden transition from being his sister to being his parental figure. But maybe expand on that. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced? Where did you find support? I know that you were part of this scholarship, and so you had some people from Rwanda around you supporting you. But how did you rise to the occasion like that?
I'll go back to the processing of his visa. When Mama Fifi told me that she would help me get him to the United States, the reason she said that is she would be coming for her daughter's graduation, my roommate, and she was hoping that we could send an invitation for both of them to come to graduation and my brother would get a visa that way. But when they went for visa processing, the person at the embassy looked at him and said, "Oh, you're too young," and just closed his folder and gave it back to him. So his visa was actually denied the first time. So I went back, I wrote a letter to the Rwandan embassy. I wrote a lot of letters, a lot of emails. I had to prove that I didn't have family in Rwanda. I had to prove that I was supported by the Rwandan government. I was on a scholarship. I was receiving a stipend. And I was really crossing my fingers that nobody realizes that this stipend was going to be ending in April 2017 when I graduated. So I only really had an income from the Rwandan government and support from the Rwandan government until I graduated and I was already a senior in college. The second time he went for his visa interview, his visa was approved and he came in as an international student. So this time I actually applied for him to come to a school in Oklahoma for which he had interviewed and for which he had received a scholarship. So he came to a school called Oklahoma Christian Academy. So I received a lot of support to get him here. I used to feel very awkward to walk into an office and meet someone for the first time, and especially people who are in really high positions and I really respect. And I was an emotional wreck. I'm trying to tell them, hey, I know I am a college student, but I have to do this. And I really need you to sign this letter to let me do this. So I was really blessed to have people who listened to me and didn't question my ability to do it. So when he got here, I had already received that support to get him here. I think the next question for me was, how do you raise a middle schooler in the United States? That part I absolutely had no idea about. I would learn a lot about it over the years, but I had to work. I started a job at a hospital here in my very last semester, and I was working evening hours. So I would go in at 5 p.m. after school and get off at midnight. But that was also part of how I had to meet the financial needs of having a child in the United States. Because I lived on campus, a lot of my classmates were my babysitters. I started figuring out his school schedule, who will drop him off, who will pick him up, because most of the time I would either be in class or needing to be at work.
You mentioned in your story you had a friend or some friends who would drop him in the morning because you were in class. So were these people you met at college or were these people from the same scholarship?
No, these were all people I met at very different places. So the first day my brother goes to school, he was taken to school by a friend. His name is Randy Olson. Randy Olson was a host family that I was assigned when I first came in as an international student at Oklahoma Christian University. And he took him in for me because he was also just wondering, how are we going to make sure he gets to school every day on time when you are in lab for your clinicals? And he also has a job to be at. So he really went to school to ask if there was any option of having a school bus. But this is a small private school. They don't have a school bus. When Randy got Sean to school that very first day, because it's a small school, a lot of the kids knew there was going to be a new student coming in from Africa. And one of his old neighbors met him and said, "Randy, I don't think you have a young kid. Why are you here?" He said, "Well, I'm helping Shaida out. Her brother just moved here from Rwanda." And Pam was like, "Oh, really?" And she was like, "Well, I drive down this street every morning to drop my girls off. Can I be dropping him off too?" And that's how Sean started getting rides. So my whole support system became the parents at OCA. At some point when he joined football, he had another set of parents who had their son in football who would pick him up at 6 a.m. because I would be still at the hospital working the night shift. And for pickup, I always had either a college friend or the Journeys would drop him off when they dropped off their daughters. I remember I had a calendar where I would write out names and have it as a PDF and share it with the respective people to just remind them, remember this day, you're the one who is picking up Sean. And it worked, but it was really stressful. But also when I look back, I truly realized how Oklahoma met me at a time I truly needed it. A lot of the people who were even letting Sean join them for like a football game, because he was also learning about the American culture and all that, were people who I had never met before. Some of them knew our story, some of them did not. But that's how I found a support system. Actually, most of my support came from people here in Oklahoma, and I don't actually have a lot of Rwandans that I stayed in touch with from here, because a lot of my college friends who were at school would graduate and move away.
There's a funny line in your story where you say, "The people I hang out with are mothers, and I am so awkward with them." Tell me about that. Did you spend a lot of time socializing with people your own age, or were you socializing with the mothers? Or maybe not socializing, but your kids might have all been in the same activities. So what was it like to navigate social life as a student/adoptive mother?
My last semester as a senior, I absolutely couldn't see anyone, not even my friends. And unfortunately, I felt like the relationships I had formed through college had now become people I was constantly texting, like, "Hey, are you doing anything Saturday night? Is there a chance you would like to do it in my apartment while sitting with my brother?" So I just sort of like took advantage of all those relationships. And these people were really good friends and they all helped me out. So I had a lot of friends who would come and spend the night at my apartment while I was at work. And then by the time I graduated, almost everyone was either moving to grad school. I had classmates who were going to medical school, or they were moving back to their hometowns. The few friends I had who stayed in the state were 23 or 22, and they were exploring what life after college looks like. But while for me, I now had more time during the day because I didn't have class. So I signed up Sean for the YMCA. So we tried soccer, we tried football, we tried tennis. I was constantly driving him from one practice to another or going from one camp to another. And because I work night shift, I honestly had no energy to do anything else after all that driving. So I lost touch with most people who are my age. And so I would end up sitting at practice or at games with other mothers who had their kids playing, and just find myself in these conversations that I really have no input on. And even just questions like, what are we going to do for away meals for the games? And I was like, oh, I didn't realize they have to eat when they go for away games, you know? So I also like the conversations were not so much socializing. I feel like they were constantly teaching me, here's what you need to be thinking about. Even just learning that fifth grade, then middle school, then high school, because I didn't study in this system. I learned that from conversations on the sidelines with parents, or even learning about this is when you buy school supplies. You wait for this time around before school starts, or he needs soccer cleats. He needs different kind of wear for different stuff. I learned that all from the mothers who I met there, because none of my friends had any idea about these things.
think it was Molly and Kristen who told me that in part of their conversations with you leading up to the show, you mentioned that one of your favorite TV shows was Modern Family.
Yes.
And I wanted to hear more about that show and your connection to it.
I love Modern Family. I think I rewatch it maybe every year. I think the reason why I mentioned it with Kristen and Molly, which they're really great coaches, by the way, I don't think I would have done well on stage without them. They're also like therapists.
It's true.
Yes. I don't know if they realized it, but they really help us process our emotions before we get on stage. I'm so thankful to them. My brother and I used to watch Modern Family because he would be at school from 8 to 3. I'd be asleep 8 to 3. And by the time he comes in from school, he's maybe having a snack and either going to practice or he's coming back from practice and really hungry. So I would make a meal and we would sit and we would watch something because I would be going to work at 6 p.m. So I really had only 2 hours with him during the day. And Modern Family was one of those things we would just watch. And I would just continuously laugh at every single episode. And my brother would be like, it's the 5th time we're watching this. Why is this so funny to you? But he didn't get tired of it. And so I just sort of always constantly played it. And it was just short enough for us to finish our meal and have me out of the house and at work on time. So I think that's part of also the reason why I liked it as a show.
You were kind enough to send over the audio clip that you reference in your story. This is the clip that you find of your mom talking about how to cook the peanut curry. I have the clip right here, so I'm going to play it and then we'll talk about it afterward. So here's the clip.
nyine ukaranga imiteja ugashyiramo igitunguru cyamara gushya ugakatiramo inyanya inyanya zamara gushya inyanya igihe uri kuzigaragura ngo zishye ufata bwa bunyobwa ukabukoroga mu tuzi duke dukonje utuzi twamara ubunyobwa bwamara nyine kuba agakoma muri y'amazi akonje mu mwanya wo gusukamo amazi mu miteja usikamo nyine bwa bunyobwa wateguye ukagaragura ugapfundikira nyine ukaza kuvanaho ubunyobwa bwahiye kugira ngo umenye ko ubunyobwa bwahiye buraguhumurira kandi bugahindura ibara murakoze.
Shaida, tell us about that clip. What are we hearing there?
So that is my mother. This audio was recorded, I think it was the summer of 2014. I did not go home the summer of 2014 when I was in college. My scholarship only allowed us to go home 2 years after we had come to the US. That's when they would pay for the ticket. So I was in Oklahoma for that summer. I was homesick and I texted my sister Shamira and I was like, I really want to eat something that reminds me of home. Can you please tell me what I can cook? And so my sister, I think that's the first voice you hear when you play the recording. She's telling my mom, hey, you need to speak to the phone, tell her how to make the curry. And my mom just jumps into this chef mode and she's talking about how you cut onions, you chop the garlic, and she tells me how to make peanut curry. I don't know if I actually made it that summer, but that audio stays in my WhatsApp messages. Fast forward, I think in 2018, like a year after my mom passed away, I had graduated. I was in my working mom mode, working night shift, parenting during the day. I realized my grief truly overwhelmed me because I didn't know where I was in life. Yeah, I liked the job I was working, but I always felt like my mom would be asking me why I'm not going back to school. And I really just really missed my mom. So I find this audio. I had always known I had it. I just didn't know if I was ready to listen to it. So when I find it and play it, it felt like receiving a hug from her. It was a very difficult audio to listen to, a very difficult audio to follow directions to, because she doesn't say any measurements of anything that I'm supposed to be cooking. So I had to play it a lot to actually make the curry. But it reminds me how no matter how much her physical absence was felt in my life, how who I am and who she raised me to be is still there. It also really helped me because I think that was the very first time my brother complimented my cooking. He has this story where he talks about how he can't eat chicken nuggets ever again because that's what I served him the very first year he was here. I just would warm up chicken nuggets a lot. But my cooking gets much better after this audio, actually.
Well, your story is really inspiring. And as we come to a close, I was wondering if you had any words of advice or words of wisdom for people listening whose lives change overnight in a way. Maybe it's a loss that they don't expect or something similar to what happened to you, where everything changes and it seems like it's overnight. Everything is different. And if you have any tips for how to navigate that kind of sudden change for people.
It's a lot of work. I think that's one thing I've learned in this process. It's a lot of work that you have to do in times where you are really short on bandwidth, especially if whatever suddenly changes in your life involves either grief in one way or another, or kind of even on the theme of our stories. You're taking care of a loved one. You're having to redefine who you are. You're having to realign your values with everything the world just placed in front of you. It would take me 7 years to circle back and go to medical school. I always knew I would go back to school. I knew I wanted to be a physician, but I knew I didn't want to be a student while parenting because being a single parent took up 90% of my time, my physical strength, my everything. So I wanted to see my brother get to at least the end of high school before I considered going back to medical school. So it didn't feel like I put off my dream, even though at some point it did. It just felt like I'm postponing it. I think the question that I needed to answer for myself, was it worth postponing? In hindsight, yes, very much so. Raising my brother is one of the best lessons and best ways I've grown in life. In a way, it seems like my mom, on her way out, she was like, let me give you an everlasting gift, because when you raise a middle schooler, you find out you have anger management issues. You know? When you teach a 16-year-old how to drive, you find out you really gotta be patient. Caring for a loved one, it very much feels like you're constantly giving, but I really received a lot from him. And he's actually moving to college tomorrow. So
Wow.
I am so proud of who he is, but I'm so proud of who he has made me. When I enter a room, even as a medical student, when I'm listening, I learn to listen for emotions. And I learned that early on because I could never relate to his stories as a high schooler in America. But I learned how to listen to his emotions. I learned how to listen to his frustrations or his happiness. I learned how to see the values of things that truly matter to him. And these are lessons I'm taking into my education in medicine. So I think patience is absolutely a must for anyone who's met with a sudden change in life. And just allowing yourself to grow in that place. I truly believe that if you're constantly asking the questions that remind you who you are, you will find yourself no matter what.
That's a beautiful note to end on. And I want to thank you so much for coming on today to unpack that story a bit more, get to know you and your brother and your mom a bit more, especially with that audio clip, and for coming to tell your story on the Nocturnist stage. It was truly an honor. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. Your show was a companion for me in a lot of my night shifts. I never thought that I would ever be on this show. I absolutely loved listening to the Nocturnist, and I still do. I think listening to stories of people in the medical world constantly reminds me how imperfectly perfect we are. But thank you. Thank you for keeping me company for so many years through your podcast.
Well, you're part of the family now.
Thank you.
This episode of The Nocturnists was produced by Sam Osborne, with mixing and editing by John Oliver. Our executive producer is Ali Block, our head of story development is Molly Rose Williams, and Ashley Pettit is our program manager. The Nocturnists is made possible by the California Medical Association, a physician-led organization that works tirelessly to make sure that the doctor-patient relationship remains at the center of medicine. To learn more about the CMA, visit cmadocs.org. The stories from Season 7 come from our live storytelling show, produced with Bellevue Literary Review on the theme of taking care. The show took place at the Leonard Nimoy Thalia Theatre at Symphony Space in New York City and was originally recorded by Amigo Studio. The show was made possible by the Physicians Foundation and First Responders First. The Nocturnists is also made possible by donations from listeners like you. Thank you so much for supporting our work in storytelling. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app and give us a rating or review to help others find us. I'm your host, Emily Silverman. See you next week.